Okay, hi, this is Marita Joyce. I'm back with another video. This time I'm going to do my Read Harder challenge, and this was sponsored by Libby. So I did the Read Harder challenge. I actually got this challenge off of Goodreads, off the Book Riot group. So that's how I learned about this challenge. And the reason I'm doing it is because you guys may know that I'm primarily a nonfiction reader, and I'm trying to get out of my comfort zone and read a lot more fiction. So that's basically why I'm doing it, and hopefully I met that goal to some extent. So the first book on my list is a book published posthumously, and for that I chose When Breath Becomes Air. I have read When Breath Becomes Air before. I'm going to reread it. It's one of those books that was a tearjerker. It really had me feeling so many different emotions. I liked the background. I liked the story of his life. I liked everything about this book. Fell in love with Paul Kalanithi, who is the author. I can never pronounce his last name. And yeah, so I want to reread the book. There is a picture of him right there on the back, and he was basically a physician and neuroscientist, I think, who during his residency found out that he had terminal cancer. And this book just starts out with his story as a child, and it goes all the way up to his death, and his wife continues the rest of the book after he has died. And it was just a very moving book, and I loved it. And so I want to reread it, which is rare for me to do, but I'm going to do that with this book, and so that's why I chose it. The next book on my list is a book of true crime. I chose The Circumference of Darkness by Jack Henderson, and I did not know if this is a true crime book or not, but I chose it because I wasn't going to get into all the killing and the blood and the guts. I wasn't doing that. This book is about an act of terrorism where someone uses information technology to pull off the heist. So I thought that would be really cool. I'm kind of interested in like information technology to a certain extent. I like technology, so I thought this would be a better pick for me than anything gruesome or gross. So yeah, I went with this one. And yeah, so if I'm not doing the categories correctly, you guys can reprimand me below. The next book on my list is a classic genre fiction, mystery, sci-fi, fantasy, or romance. And I chose Jane Austen's Emma for this one. This is a classic. It's a Penguin classic, actually. But yeah, this is a classic book, and I purchased this book October 9th, 2015 at a library book sale. And I wrote in there, I wrote the date and everything in there, and I put my name on it. So I was determined to read this book. I've had it on my shelf for quite some time and still hadn't got around to it. This is a tissue organ donation thing. I don't know why this is in here, maybe just as a bookmarker, but so yeah, I need to read this book. I think this is going to be a great one, so I chose it. The next book on my list is a book set in or about one of the 5 BRICS countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, or South Africa. This was great because, I skipped a category. I'm supposed to be doing a comic written and illustrated by the same person. Sorry. That one I chose Moon Knight. And no, this is not written and illustrated by the same person. I am breaking the rules again. But it is a comic that I thought would be really interesting. This guy here in his straight jacket and all. This is Mark Spector's, aka Moon Knight. Jack Lockley, Stephen Grant, has been fighting criminals and keeping New York City safe for years. Or has he? When Mark wakes up in an insane asylum with no powers and a lifetime worth of medical records, all of his identities are called into question. He's surrounded by faces: a haughty doctor, hostile orderlies, vacant-eyed patients. But maybe those faces are just masks. Some hide friends, others enemies. Or even worse, gods and monsters. Mark will have to fight his way out. Will his patron come to save him this time? The moon is high, the mask is on, but if he succeeds in escaping, he will only find a city of sand. And what will it mean when Mark Spector comes face to face with Moon Knight? Everything you know may be wrong, and you'd be insane not to find out for sure. So there's that, and these are some of the pictures inside if you guys want to kind of get an idea of what's going on in this comic. Yeah, so that's that. And it says Lunatic down here at the bottom, and this is published by Marvel. Okay, so I'm going with that one. The next book on my list is a book set in or about the 5 BRICS countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Now this one I've never read a book set in or about another country, really. Not that I can remember. Anyway, not a non-fiction book. I mean, not a fiction book. So this is going to be kind of interesting. I chose Dreams of Joy by Lisa C. She is the author of Shanghai Girls. So yeah, this should be good. This should be interesting. I do like to learn about other cultures and their ways of life and what they do and their food and everything. I think that's really, really interesting. So that's going to be fun. All right, the next choice is a book about nature. I chose Color and Vision: The Evolution of Eyes and Perception by Steve Parker. I love this book. I was gifted this book, and I love it. It's all about animals and their eyes. I love it. It tells about the physiology of their eyes. It tells about the function, everything about the eyes of all of these unique animals. And the pictures are absolutely amazing. It just tells us all these interesting things that I personally never knew. I don't know a lot about animals. I didn't like take zoology or anything like that in school, so I don't know a whole lot about animals, and it's just interesting to me. They have arthropods in here. This is just amazing. They are using the human eye as an analogy just to show us how magnificently created these animals are. And there's actually an eyeball in a glass there. Interesting, more interesting. This book talks about a snake that basically uses infrared waves to see its prey. And I thought that was one of the most interesting. You see those holes near the snake's nostrils? That is used to actually, I don't know, I want to say see the infrared waves, but some kind of way that's used to actually be able to see the infrared waves or feel the heat or whatever the case may be. You guys are going to have to read this to really get the details on it, because maybe I'm not doing a good job of explaining that. But I just thought this book was amazing. I haven't had a chance to read it all from cover to cover, but I have skimmed it, and it's just lovely. That in front of you is a black fly, and it has iridescent colors on the eyes, and those are all the eyes on a fly. Isn't that beautiful? So yeah, that's why I chose this book. The next book on my list is a Western. And I'm being naughty because I did not choose a Western. What I did choose was The Widow of the South, and it's by Robert Hicks. And yeah, so this is in 1894, Carrie McGovick is an old woman who has only her former slave to keep her company, and almost 1,500 soldiers buried in her backyard. Years before, rather than let someone plow over the field where these young men had been buried, Carrie dug them up and reburied them in her own personal cemetery. Now as she walks the rows of the dead, an old soldier appears. It is the man she met on the day of the battle that changed everything. The man who came to her house as a wounded soldier and left with her heart. He asked if the cemetery has room for one more. So I just thought that would be interesting. I'm just going to tell you guys, I have zero interest in Westerns. I don't own any Westerns. I don't want to own any Westerns. But I'm supposed to be doing this to broaden my horizons. So I picked up this book. You guys are lucky that I even touched something that would be called or could be called a Western. This is obviously not a Western. But you're still lucky that I picked this book up because it has something that resembles a Confederate flag on the back of it. So yes, I have pushed the envelope in picking up that book. The next thing we're going to talk about is the next book on my list, which is a comic written or illustrated by a person of color. I chose March, book 1. This comic book was written by Congressman John Lewis, who is an American icon and one of the key figures of the civil rights movement. John Lewis wrote March, which is a vivid first-hand account of John Lewis's life struggle for civil and human rights, meditating in the modern age on the distance traveled since the days of Jim Crow and segregation. Rooted in Lewis's personal history, it also reflects on the highs and lows of the broader civil rights movement. Book 1 spans John Lewis's life in rural Alabama, his life-changing meeting with Martin Luther King, the birth of the Nashville student movement, and their battle to tear down segregation through nonviolent lunch counter sit-ins. I think it's going to be great. I'm really interested in comics at this point because I read Habibi, which is a graphic novel that captivated me. Habibi is a 500 plus book. I read it in about a week. I was just eating that book up at night. It was the first graphic novel, comic book, whatever you have it, that I ever laid my hands on or ever even thought about touching. I loved it, and because of that, now I'm interested in comics and things like that, and I chose this one as my second up. I will do a review of Habibi for you guys because I was so captivated by that graphic novel, let me tell you. I don't want to start talking about it because I'm going to get off subject, but yes. So that's number 2 on the list, and I chose that one because it kind of had an interesting background to it. The next book on my list is a book of colonial or post-colonial literature, and for that I chose Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. I think that's a beautiful cover, and I've heard really great things about Toni Morrison. So the next book on my list is, I lost my place, a romance novel by or about a person of color. I chose Irene Sabatini's The Boy Next Door. So basically this is about a young girl who is living in Zimbabwe, and she basically gets involved with a guy who has a rap sheet as long as my arm. He's been in jail, been in prison, he's been released, now he's out. She's fallen in love with him, and she's secretly seeing him behind her parents' back. So I thought that was going to be really interesting. There's the book cover, which I think is beautiful, and we're moving right along to the next book. The next book is a children's classic published before 1980. For this one, I chose my all-time favorite childhood book, Charlotte's Web. And this is an edition that I got from Barnes & Noble. Isn't that beautiful? I'm a lover of all things gold. I love gold. And this book happens to be laced in gold. Charlotte's Web is here. We have Stuart Little, copyright 1945 by E.B. White. Charlotte's Web, 1952 by E.B. White, and The Trumpet and the Swan, 1970. So there you have it. This is going to be forever with me. I will have this. I will own this. I bought this edition, which was kind of expensive from Barnes & Noble, but it was worth every dime because I plan to pass this to my kids and have them pass this to their kids and on for generations. I love Charlotte's Web, and I just will not let her go. Okay. So here we go. The next book on my list is a celebrity memoir. For a celebrity memoir, I chose Cher, The First Time. So this is a book about Cher and how there's no one else quite like her. She's been a pop star, TV star, movie star, a wife, a mother, and yet the New York Times has written she's still a funny, gusty woman who is genuine and down to earth. So basically the memoir details memories of her mother, the movie Dumbo, when at age 4 she peed her pants rather than go to the bathroom and miss anything. Her public performances, memories of her music, and her passion for West Side Story. The time she met her father at age 11, time living with Sonny Bono at age 16 in a platonic arrangement in which she cleaned his apartment. Yeah, sure, Cher. Anyway, I think this is going to be a very interesting read. It's going to talk about her extramarital affair. Yeah, an apology from Sunny. I wonder what that's about. Anyway, there it is. I'm going to read share, guys. The next book on my list is, let's see, an Oprah book club selection, and I chose We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I tried to read this book. I didn't make it very far. I will try again. I will attempt again because I'm trying to be open-minded about things. I'm trying to step out of my comfort zone. So I will try again. Next book on my list is a book of social science. A book of social science. You guys know me. I am in love with all things mental health, social science, psychology, all of that. Nursing. I love that kind of stuff. So when I was told to pick a book of social science, I decided to go with my interest. So I chose The Psychopath Test. It's a journey through the madness industry by John Ironson. And it's basically when John Ronson is drawn in an elaborate hoax played on some of the world's top scientists. Blah, blah, blah. I'm getting tongue-tied. His investigation leads him unexpectedly to psychopaths. He meets an influential psychologist who is convinced that many important business leaders and politicians are in fact high-flying, high-functioning psychopaths, and teaches Ronson how to spot them. Armed with this new abilities, Ronson meets a patient inside an asylum for the criminally insane who insists that he's insane. He's insane, y'all. A mere run-of-the-mill troubled youth, not a psychopath. A claim that might be only manipulation and signs of his psychopathy. Yes. He spends time with a death squad leader institutionalized for mortgage fraud, and with a legendary CEO who took joy in shutting down factories and firing people. He delves into the fascinating history of psychopathy, diagnosis, and treatments, and from LSD-fueled days, long naked therapy sessions in prisons, to attempt to understand serial killers. I'm just dying. Yes, this is going to be good. This is going to give me life. I can just tell. This is going to be a good one. So I chose this one for a book of social science. Does it fit the category? You guys be the judge. All right. Next book on my list is a one-sitting book. And I chose Tuesday with Maury, of course. This is my favorite book. I love Mitch Albom. I love this book. Like this book, I don't know. It just makes me feel so many different emotions. I'm sorry to be so gloomy and reading all these books about death and stuff, y'all. But this is just me. Like, this is what I love. Tuesdays with Maury, an old man, a young man, and life's greatest lessons. Like, it just didn't get any better than that. All right. The next book on my list is the first book in a new to you young adult or middle grade series. That wasn't difficult at all because I don't usually read young adult or middle grade. So I chose Fixing Delilah by Sarah Oakley. And you can see there I still have the price tag. I got this book for $1. Yeah, so I'll be reading it. I don't know. Maybe I'll fall in love with young adult. Who knows? Since that's what this reading list is all about anyway. Okay, so the next book on my list is a sci-fi novel with a female protagonist by a female author. And I chose Dawn by Octavia Butler. And there it is. So sci-fi is not really something that I usually read, but we have a new sci-fi special interest bookstore here in my city, and so I went down there and I bought a bunch of sci-fi books. Guys, trust me, I'm really trying here. I'm really trying to open it up and spread the horizon. So I've done the right things. I may not have chosen all the right books for this list, but I've definitely broadened my horizons and bought books outside of the comfort zone, and this was one of them. So the next book on my list is a comic that isn't published by Marvel, DC, or Image. And I followed instructions this time. I chose 901 Comics Anthology. And this is basically, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. 901 is my area code. And this is an anthology from the artists and the writers put together here in my city. So I just thought this would be really interesting. And you can see we got our own little superhero there with 901 on his chest. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. You guys should check it out. Apparently, they have a new one coming out called Satori Wisdom's Warrior. So I can see that